Okay, now we go here. Okay, I hope you all are seeing it. Are you seeing autocracy's concentric ring?
Yes, and I'm gonna get my reading glasses.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So, this is pretty much current events driven, and the current events are just, they just keep coming. And what struck me, was that you've got crises going on in three countries that really surround the Silk Road. They're all on three on the Silk Road periphery, and so we're very prepared to deal with what the heck's going on. So it struck me, and I thought we would go through and just review a little bit about the autocratization that we talked about from V-Dem, the people who really crunch the numbers for the World Bank and places like that. And just a brief review for any of you that missed it, the world has been trending towards dictatorship. Now encompassing 70% of the world's population. And just like in our country, liberal democracies are on the back foot in a lot of places. And so surviving liberal democracies now are only 13% of the world population. And the decline is especially evident in Asia Pacific, along the Silk Road, as you'd have it. And you'll remember this graph just shows the drop off in liberal democracy over the last 20 years, really in all regions of the world. Yes, Homer.
Well, just in looking at that map, all those autocracies are currently being challenged, or at least are facing major social unrest, from China to Iran to Russia.
Yep, that's why I picked that map. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, I'm heading that direction.
Thank you.
So the bottom 10% on this rating system of democracy participation, here's China, just right at the bottom. And we don't know it because we're living in it, but the last 20 years have been the age of the strong man. But here's an update on these guys grasping for world dominance. We took care of Trump, let's hope forever. But the four today, going back to the map that Homer was referring to, Khamenei replaces Trump because we've seen this wonderful determination in China now. And we'll get to determination in Iran, certainly the women, but I'm going to focus on one particular woman. And then Russia, we don't know exactly what's going on in behind the scenes in Russia, but we know there's some discontent, so we'll see. And here's a better map, just Russia, Iran, and this is the central core. Yeah, Harold.
I was going to comment that Khamenei, the leader of Iran, and Trump have something else in common. They both have nieces that think they're assholes, and Khamenei's niece just got arrested.
I know. I have a slide. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm taking your thunder again.
No, you
But, uh,
no. It never. You never take my thunder. You foreshadow. I appreciate foreshadowing. So thank you. Because it shows that this group is, I'm on the same wavelength, at least with this group. I'm not off the reservation, not yet. And you add to this ring, of course, Afghanistan, talking about women. Holy cow, they can't even go to elementary school, it seems. And so there you are. If you add Afghanistan, you've got a complete ring just because of this little Pancha Valley that extends into the border of China. And we know inside the ring, inside the concentric ring, all of these countries are autocracies. So we've, because of Ramsey's foresight, we've read the book on the world history according to the Silk Road, and we'll be at some point talking about that in more detail. All right, so let's get to China specifically. So here's the guy, Peng Lifa. We remember maybe a month ago, just before the party Congress in Beijing, a report that was of a protest banner hung from an overpass. And the Economist just did a mea culpa for saying, well, that's a one-off. That doesn't mean anything. Turns out it does mean something. So this new guy, Peng Lifa, he disguised himself as a construction worker. I have a picture of that in just a second. Went up and hung these banners and lit a fire just to make sure people would be attracted to it. And he added an audio dimension, a pre-recorded protest chant through loudspeakers. This guy was not only brave, but he's organized. Daring messages, which I'll show in just a second, and criticizing Xi for enslaving his people. Pretty dangerous. So just the context, this is the overpass during rush hour. So it's not a minor overpass at all. This is a major artery right through Beijing, the Sitong Bridge. And this is our guy, Peng Lifa. And here he is disguised as a construction worker. And here he's raised it. And here's the specifics that we didn't think were important at the time. The messages are, I'll let you read it for yourself. Yeah, so this was not a one-off. All of these epigrams are being circulated throughout China and even outside of China in the Chinese diaspora. He was arrested and hasn't been seen since, but his message lives on all across China, specifically these cities, major demonstration, and of course, Hong Kong, and 200 universities across the planet. And I thought, that's interesting, across the planet. What does that mean? Stanford. We have some Stanford alums here. And these are the protest signs and solidarity at Stanford. All right, so with a sense of very good timing, I want to point you all to another resource a new book that just came out, Susan Shirk, Uncovering China's Past and Future. Well-timed. She was interviewed at the Commonwealth Club within the last 6 weeks. So I'd recommend it. A very good interview. Also, The Economist is trying to make up, I guess. They've just started a new podcast called Drum Tower, which of course is a major square in many Chinese cities where there was a big drum in a tower that would beat out the time. And I highly recommend it. It's very good. This had been preceded by another Economist podcast on the biography of Xi, and it just finished a month ago, 9 installments. The Prince, why? Because his father had been a prominent member of the Communist Party, and in fact was a victim in the Cultural Revolution. And Xi's family was sent down. Xi himself suffered through the Cultural Revolution, and here he is kind of reorganizing it. This is the reporter that's responsible for both of the podcasts. She got kicked out of China for her reporting in the LA Times first, and now at The Economist. And she grew up across the Chinese world. But in America, she studied at Princeton, alternating with Peking University. Interesting biography. And she contributed to this special edition that really kicked off our interest in China, more in the realm of foreign policy. What does China want in its foreign policy? But there were allusions in those 6 articles to domestic policy, and boy, oh boy, is domestic policy strong now, particularly in the realm of COVID, zero tolerance. So this is the niece that Harold was talking about. And if you haven't seen her video, it is courageous. She doesn't pull punches at all. So here we have to oppose the ring of autocracy, we have really 3 heroes. And this is our guy Zelensky, who Timothy Snyder can't praise enough for his bravery and his understanding that you can't count on determinism at the end of history. You've got to go out and make your decision and influence events. That our world isn't established by larger forces. It still very much depends on individual agency. And here we have 3 people who are courageous. Again, so now the leading demagogues are truly all from the Silk Road. Fortunately, we're off that list. So I want to focus a little bit before we get to Crimea part 2, a little bit more on Putin's bio, and it came up, and maybe you saw it too, on the PBS where they interviewed the writer of a history of Vladimir Putin. It's called The Accidental Tsar. And the interesting thing about it is it's a graphic novel, which allows me to make slides. And I'm just gonna, I took a few from the interview and did screenshots. This one is the beginning of Putin's life as a child. But 12 years before, his mother, this is during the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, the siege of Leningrad, his mother was so malnourished that she appeared to be dead, and she woke up in the morgue. And they tried to show this, but this cartoon shows what happened. She did wake up. Now, Putin has an autobiography of sorts. It's an as told to for journalists, and the journalists are independent. This is in the 90s, late 90s, just as Putin's about ready to attain power. It's clear. This was recommended by Susan Glazer, who is a strong, knowledgeable voice about Russian politics. And she said it's surprisingly open, and I found it was as well. But written in the late 90s, I think published in the year 2000, just as Putin took over. And he tells the story of his mother almost dying in the siege of Leningrad. And this is I think one of the longest sieges in history, certainly costly, and many classified it as genocide. And isn't that interesting? So the siege of Leningrad, and now we have the siege of many cities in Ukraine. What history repeats itself, but the second time is farce. This is Putin's comments, a picture that he has of his mother. And this is the way he told the story. It's basically what I just said. But that's in this biography. But that's not all. Putin is an only child by virtue of losing two siblings. The first child was during the war and probably died right away a few months after birth from malnutrition, either of the kid or his mother. And then the second brother, they thought they'd put him in a children's home where they would guarantee food. But when you do that, you invite infectious disease, and he died of diphtheria. And so at the age of 41, his mother tried again and had the only child. Here he is at age 6, a bad student, always late for school, a brat, and he didn't even make it to their version of the Boy Scouts. He was so naughty. And what he did was hang out in the courtroom of the Leningrad apartment complex. And when he started to be bullied, he began to play sports. And then by the 6th grade, he realized he needed to buck up. There's one story about that's in this graphic novel that's also a story he tells of Um, also a story he tells of chasing down a rat in this complex. But the rat turns the table and turns on Putin, and Putin suddenly realizes that if you're cornered, you have to be ruthless. Now, there's supposed to be a lesson today in predicting how Putin's going to behave, and that's kind of a stretch. At the age of 10, Putin took up the martial arts. So when we see him bare-chested and muscular, that's earned. He was the judo champion of St. Petersburg in 1975. And so, I'm sorry, it would have been Leningrad, wouldn't it have? Judo was more than just a sport for him. It's a philosophy. So he's extrapolated a bit. But getting back to when he was a teenager, he had superheroes, and they were members of the KGB, and he developed this ambition at a very young age to join, and inspired by movies and novels. And this is one of the epic Soviet movies, The Shield and the Sword, about the KGB. So at the age of 16, he goes to the KGB headquarters and is advised, you know, you're going to have to go to law school, and you're going to have to keep your mouth shut. And so that's what he did. The Sword and the Shield, the KGB continued to live off of the popularity of the movie. So in his autobiography, here are three photos of him that's in his book from his KGB days. And there's a Russian word that applies to everybody who is in a security apparatus. And you'll hear about the siloviki, and this is the group that is supporting Putin now, and the thugs that keep the citizenry under control. And they come not only the police, but from other groups, both Soviet and current Russian groups.
Majority order one.
And here he is. It seems like his life in the KGB has hit a dead end. He wasn't that talented, and at the age of 33, he finally got an escape. He left for Germany in 1985. And that's not going to end well 4 years later. But he hooks up with the German secret service, the Stasi, and we've seen the movie about that, the words of others, or something like that, and he is going to witness the fall of the wall and the loss of Soviet empire. And he is in the furthest western part of it, in East Germany, in Dresden, in fact. The East Germany at the time is run by this guy. And when I was there in 1961, 62, Stanford in Germany, and staying on in Berlin, this guy's picture was everywhere, and he was a Stalinist to the core, and that's the kind of guy that Putin served under. This is a picture of him in East Germany with young Germans. The fall of the wall, he's extremely disillusioned. He heads back to Leningrad, soon to be St. Petersburg again, and decides to go into academics. But he is persuaded by this very interesting guy, Sobchak. At the time Putin arrives, he's the chair of the city council, but he's going to become a mayor. And so he's a Democrat. And so Putin throws himself into democratic politics. This is the guy, Sobchak. He had been Putin's professor when Putin was going to law school, so he could get into the KGB. So they knew each other, so he's Sobchak's deputy, and is involved in the reconstruction of St. Petersburg, and he helped Sobchak become mayor. He works in way. He's influential even in the early days back from Dresden. He meets, of all people, Henry Kissinger, who is there trying to help St. Petersburg industrialize, and he's got connections with a lot of major industries in America. So Coca-Cola helped put in infrastructure for St. Petersburg. Gillette, Wrigley, they set up an economic zone where these American companies get a special treatment. They put it in a fiber optic cable to, of all places, Copenhagen. Sobchak tasks him with the job of creating a faculty for international relations, I guess based on his experience in Dresden. He gets to do a lot of interesting things as they're building up the infrastructure, but there's allegations of corruption. And in 1996, Sobchak loses re-election. And my question is, what if he had won re-election? What if he had won re-election? For the second time, Putin is very discouraged. He had met, of all people, Kissinger. He picked him up at the airport. They had a long conversation. Kissinger said he got his start in intelligence, just like Putin did. Putin remarked that it seemed like Kissinger was falling asleep in the car, but he heard everything, even when it seemed like he was asleep. Kissinger, being a realist, opined that Gorbachev should not have let go of the Russian sphere of influence so quickly. And that memory has fueled Putin's recollection and perhaps his desire to recreate empire. So they lost the election, and then unexpectedly, in the year 2000, just after Putin took over power in the Soviet Union, Sobchak dies at the age of 43. And for about the only time anybody can remember, Putin cried in public. This is Sobchak's teenage daughter. She's going to return to the story. And another chance event. What if Sobchak hadn't died? Would he have influenced Putin's evolution as leader of Russia? So this is the teenager who grew up, and she became a celebrity. Think of Paris Hilton or somebody like that. She very influential in her early days, became a presenter on TV, and then moved into politics. She, in 2018, was that single token candidate that we heard about. Nobody else really running against Putin in 2018. But she became a token candidate and ran against him, and earned the enmity of the supporters of Navalny, who thought she was lending a facade to what Putin was doing, making it seem like there was a real election. Interestingly, about a month ago, she fled, and many people thought there was a watershed moment. If Putin lost the support of someone like her, what's going to happen? And this is one of the mysterious glimpses we get of Russian domestic opinion. She returned a couple of weeks ago. It's unclear what she's going to do now that she's come back. So how did Putin rise so quickly after Sobchak died? He had connections with Yeltsin. He had been his local campaign manager in St. Petersburg. And when he took power, and some people allege this was the deal, the Yeltsin family was so deep in corruption that they relied on Putin when he took over to pardon everybody. And it's true that none of Yeltsin's relatives have been charged. So that's the conspiracy. His first big test was Chechnya. The Russians had failed miserably in the first Chechen war. And they were very interested in preserving the Caucasus as Russian. It was hard won. That finally took place in the 1880s and 1840s. We're going to talk about the closing of the steppe, and that was Russia's main contribution, if you will, to peace, to tame the steppes and the horsemen that came out over and over again. We have a book by Harold. Speak, Harold.
I was just going to point out that this is the book about the Russians taking over what is now Chechnya.
Okay.
It's a very good book.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. So Chechnya was his first real test, and here is one of his most famous quotes. If we catch them in the toilet, we'll wipe them out in the outhouse. And boy, did he. He destroyed Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. And who knows? Will he go that far this time? Does Ukraine mean that much to him? You know that biography, autobiography, semi-autobiography? You want to know how many times Ukraine is mentioned in that autobiography? One time. And it's in the year 2000, it was Ukraine was not a priority. The one time alluded to a ski vacation that he took in Ukraine. But it certainly is high on his list now. So this is the Siloviki down here, the third tier. The graphic novel presents the organization as a pyramid with only Putin at the top, and the personal contacts are more important than the legal structure, and it's all his cronies, all his cronies. So there is something cartoonish about the image that has been created in Russia, Putin without his shirt, famously. A familiar name, Fiona Hill, she wrote a book called Mr. Putin, and it's organized in terms of 6 personas that Putin has. And confusingly, she presents one persona chronologically at a time. It's a hard book to read, but the premise is interesting. Who is the real Mr. Putin? You got 6 choices. He has 6 choices on any given day. The lingering influence of the realist Kissinger. The graphic novel asserts that what Putin really wants is for Russia to be perceived as sitting at the table, having a sphere of influence, and he certainly lost that at the UN. He is a persona non grata. Russia has been kicked off a number of committees, and there's even talk about redoing the Security Council, pointing out that it guarantees the Soviet Union, not Russia. That's a long shot, but that's his goal. He just wants the Russian Empire to continue in some form, and he's said as much. The greatest tragedy in history was the fall of the Russian Empire. So just a few visuals on the great Kremlin palace and how Putin's visiting dignitaries are received. And Fiona Hill points this out because she's met with them a number of times. The important thing is the 4 statues that are in the receiving room. Obviously, Peter and Catherine, but also Nicholas I and Alexander II, who are particular Putin heroes because they were reformers. And we'll get to Nicholas I when we talk about the Crimean War. Here's how he projects this power, or is it just COVID? We don't. Who knows? Who knows? But it's bizarre. This is a parody of his meeting with Macron. The table's so big that they could play ping pong, or I guess in this case, badminton, or host ballerinas. The world is so grim these days that I have to throw in a little levity. this maybe goes too far. I apologize. Shigeko, I apologize. Snyder, in all of the accounts of Putin's view of history, he has nothing to say about the future. He is so taken up with his own mysticism because the Orthodox Church has put him in as kind of a modern day savior, and he can't resist that seduction. But the way he looks at history, he's always attaching Russia to someone else's history. And so the cartoonists have taken that up as well. Russia's not for anything, it's only against in the eyes of Timothy Snyder. And all right, so that's a quick look at the ring of autocracies, focusing mostly on Russia and Putin. I trust that we'll be coming back and spending more time with China. We already got a head start looking at China's foreign policy, but I'm sure we'll circle back because events are moving fast. We can hardly keep up with one topic before current events demand attention. So back to Crimea, I bought it forward to the year 12,000. And the pre-Mongol Kiev area is has disappeared, and I wanted to point out the Cumans, who were a steppe people that eventually came down to Crimea. There is no Moscow because it really doesn't exist yet. There is a principalities of Rus. This is the survival of the Kievan dynasty. This is Novgorod, and Novgorod arguably picked up the torch from Kiev. And you could argue that Novgorod existed before Kiev. They were the ones that were the gateway of the Vikings coming in from the Baltic and the northern Russian waterways. And the Mongols finally sweep in. Notice that they don't take control of the very south of Crimea. This has been part of the Silk Road forever, and has at this point in time protection from Constantinople, which basically controls the Black Sea. The Golden Horde comes in, eventually takes over Kiev, and so Kiev is gone. Novgorod is shown here as under the control, and Moscow finally appears, and they have a very particular function as tax collector for the Mongols, and the Golden Horde part of their legacy. I want to point out Kazan. Eichel and I met a traveler in Lithuania who was from Kazan and was vacationing there. And we were having a hell of a time trying to pay the bus driver from the airport. And he came and helped us, and one thing led to another, and we had a couple of meals with him and very frank conversations. But Kazan is going to be important here, and there's a Tatar connection. So possibly this was an area of Crimean tribal occupation as well. More about that in a second. But notice how much further north it is. Yes, Aiko.
Well, you forgot, sorry, I'm off mute, right? You forgot to mention that this Tatar guy that we met, he seemed very paranoid after we said we were on our way to Russia. And, you know, he is a minority in Russia. And he was in computers, I think, and he was a little bit nervous about what might, you know, hopefully we're tourists, but maybe we had other connections and stuff. And he was really cautious, and he kind of disappeared after he found out that we were headed to Russia.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for adding that. That's a fascinating detail. So this map shows Moscow and Kazan, and certainly it's intended to show the flow of trade along the Silk Road. And you can see that Ukraine is very much part of that trade route. There was a direct road from Kiev to Krakow, so there's even a connection to Europe further west. All right. So how did Moscow finally establish its independence from the Mongols / Tatars? Because the Tatars collaborated with the Mongols. Now, Putin really emphasizes Moscow's Duke, this guy Donskoy, and his early leadership. And he is credited with the expulsion of the Tatars, who were the enforcers of the Mongol hegemony. And that, he says, that was in 1378, Moscow specifically. But here, 2 years after that, you have an epic battle between Ivan III, known as Ivan the Great, and he broke the Russians free from Tatar control. And I just make this tangential point that Novgorod has as great a claim as Kiev ever did to be the founder of the Russian culture. And Ivan had to conquer Novgorod before he could do anything else. And his playbook may seem familiar to when you look at what Putin's doing to Ukraine. He used food as a leverage, try to starve out Novgorod. The Novgorod aristocracy and small merchants were deported to Siberia. And he took over the history of Novgorod, the Novgorod Chronicle. So you can find parallels in Russian policy in this action that he's taking in Ukraine, to use the euphemism. All right. So this is Ivan the Great himself, a imagined depiction of throwing out the Tatars. We're not collecting taxes for you anymore. No tribute. Don't come back. And so he's given credit for taming the boyars, who were Viking nobility, really, and opposing Poland-Lithuania Commonwealth action in Ukraine. He is also given credit or blame for the centralization of power in the Russian state. Now, he had one more thing to do, and that was to just wipe the Tatars off the map. And so his next thing was to conquer Kazan. And so I wasn't familiar with Tatars or Kazan. There's going to be a connection that's going to become clear what the Kazan has to do with the Tatars. But here's Moscow. And he moves against the Kazan and wins and is known as the conqueror of Kazan as much for anything else. And even today, that is memorialized in the Russian Orthodox Church, as I'll show you. So this is a map of Tatars and where they've lived. You can see the south of Ukraine, including Crimea. They eventually fled to Turkey, both from Potemkin and Stalin later. But if you look at their population, the Tatars have been distributed really throughout Russia. There is a heavy concentration in Uzbekistan, because that's the part of the Soviet Union where Stalin banished the surviving Crimean Tatars under the suspicion that they collaborated with Nazis during World War II. Within 3 days, every Tatar in Crimea had been deported. Here is how this battle with Kazan is commemorated. Their most holy church icon is called Our Lady of Kazan, and Our Lady of Kazan is trotted out for every major battle Russia has fought. Just like Our Lady of Kazan saved us in the battle with Kazan, every battle it's bought out and celebrated magically. And here is the church in St. Petersburg on the main thoroughfare that Aiko and I visited and saw this. This is the original icon, Our Lady of Kazan. Orthodox churches are not like our churches. You don't come for one service. It's open to everybody anytime you want to get in line. And there was a huge line to come up and kiss the icon, which we were there in 2016. And so, but even then, pre-COVID, we did not kiss the icon. I'm checking my time here, and I've got another 5 minutes, so I'll be searching for a place to stop. Just our beloved maps. This map is great. It just shows Russian expansion from Ivan's time and how quickly within 60 years, they had moved to the Pacific shore. It was really incredible. We have our tales about the conquering of the West, and they have their tales about the conquering of the East. But the greats, Peter and Catherine, are in red. This is the Black Sea kind of tilted on its side, kind of disorienting. And this is Potemkin, what he did, but this is New Russia, if you will, that goes up to the Dnieper. And Jim, we are going to get the Cossacks and what nationality they are based on your query last week. But I don't think we're going to reach there today, because this is probably a good place to stop. So when we resume, we'll talk about how Russia gained the confidence to tame the rest of the steppes. And some of it had to do with defeating Napoleon. And my question is going to be next week, Napoleon was not prepared for the winter. He thought things were going to go much faster. He thought he'd get to Moscow and be well provisioned. But in war, things don't go to plan. And my question is, are Russian troops prepared for the winter in the fields of Ukraine? Will they fare better or worse than the people who live there and have networks and have actually the Cossack spirit? So next week you will learn why and how Ukrainians identify with Cossacks. I'll stop there. Questions? We're good?
No, I have a question.
Okay.
Remember you started all this lecture series by talking about the strong man and how civilization, you showed like the church and culture and all these things that are happening. Do you think because we are going towards the age of this strong man, we're going backwards on that time frame as well?
Yeah, sure. But the reason, and I think Homer was thinking along these lines as well, have the autocracies reached their limit? Do autocracies make good decisions? Probably not. There's nobody at Putin's elbow telling him, the Ukrainians don't love you as much as you think. Is there anybody at Xi Jinping's elbow saying, we've been reading some stuff, and this zero tolerance of COVID, that may not be a good idea? Is there anybody telling Khamenei, why don't you back off a little bit on women's dress? How important is that really? And so I don't know. A couple of weeks ago, when we looked at all the data that showed how ascendant autocracies were, I was a little bit depressed. But all these events, and they seem to be all emerging at once, makes you wonder if there's a global, what would be the global spirit, for lack of a better word. You all can tell me what a better word would be. But is there a contagion? Is there something going on? Ramsey calls me out for being Pollyannish all the time. If I'm not Pollyannish, I'm too sentimental. Well, I plead guilty. I'm hopeful. I heard one interesting discussion that the best place to be is to be a hopeful pessimist. So I'll say I'm a pessimist, but I'm a hopeful pessimist.
Well, you get an idea of a fragility of these strong men. It's internal. That I just find it fascinating that Xi Jinping is so threatened by people holding up blank placards. I mean, that's a really scared person. That it's a crime against the state to hold up a blank piece of paper. He's projecting something. He's projecting his fears onto the blank pages, and he finds it deeply threatening, as he probably should. His fears are part of the reason he's going to come down.
Let's hope.
That's my optimistic pessimism.
Do you think it fits in with John's sense that we don't know what Russia stands for and that Putin doesn't really have content and his brain is kind of blank and he's just acting out of being a bully?
Well, of course, I was talking about these blank pages in China, but I was trying to suggest that this is a common feature of strong men, that they're really very fragile. They're very easily frightened, and they're frightening themselves some of the time.
Well, if you don't have 8 or 10 or 20 smart guys around you and good buddies who can support you, it's scary, especially if you're out on the edge.
Yep.
You know,
I can remember in the 1990s when China put up their first attempts at censorship of the internet, the so-called Great Wall. And Clinton's response was, a lot of luck with that. and I think Clinton might be right. You can't, with VPN, you can't keep this information from flowing. Navalny's got his own YouTube channel, and even as he sits there in Siberia, his lawyers and diehards are putting out his information and his spirit. And in China, the Ukraine podcast from the BBC said one problem is with the censors themselves. The people who watch content all day long, and in a period like this where they're totally swamped with content, that they get, number one, tired, and who knows, maybe they even turn some of them. So maybe it's not so much neutralizing the police, it's neutralizing and exhausting the censors themselves. So there's another Pollyannish idea for you. Okay, glad you can make it, Jeannie. So
I was glad to be here. But we did have something on Thanksgiving, so I had to hit the road fast to get food.
Oh, that's why you were here last
Yes, I wasn't
Thursday.
here.
Yeah. Okay, well, everybody, we'll see you next week. And
Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you.
John.
That was
Thank you,
great.
John.
All
As
right.
always. Bye.
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 Bye.